by volunteers here.
We're on air.
Good afternoon. I'm Iain MacWhirter of the Sunday Herald. Welcome to day 2 of Referendum TV, our experiment in takeover television. We're here at the Hill Street Theatre in Edinburgh's Festival Fringe, venue 41, in front of a small but perfectly formed audience. There they go. You're watching us live, but here's the thing. There's no BBC, there's no STV, there's no Sky coming between us. Referendum TV is entirely produced, recorded and transmitted live by volunteers here in the theatre using ordinary domestic equipment and broadcasting over the internet. What could be simpler? Well, this is actually going to be the future of broadcasting. In future, anyone can do it. As they say, don't bemoan the media, become the media. Well, later on we'll be discussing many of the news events of the day. We'll be speaking to the celebrated journalist and political writer Neil Acheson and Tommy Sheppard, former Assistant General Secretary of the Scottish Labour Party, who now runs a Stand Comedy Club, and others. But joining me now on the sofa, first off, our co-presenter, businesswoman and broadcaster Michelle Thomson.
Hello.
What kind of a week have you had?
Well, I have to say an extraordinarily busy one. Started off on Monday, lunch, not just me, 50 business and professional women with the Deputy First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, third sector, public sector, arts, Elaine C. Smith and so on. That was really thoroughly enjoyable, and what I liked about that was the fact that it was about engaging with, listening to rather than talking at, which is a kind of personal bugbear of mine about the way we do our politics at the moment in the UK, if you like.
It wasn't just lobbyies for independence.
No, there were some seriously hard questions, and it was a genuinely balanced mix of people from both yes, no and undecided. But what I find quite interesting was that the esteemed professions, the lawyers, serious lawyers there, whereas a year ago perhaps independence might have been the most ridiculous thing they'd ever thought about. This time is that they were seriously thinking about and making it real.
You really
for
think
their own
that
sector.
taking over these professionals?
I would say that it's certainly inroads are now being made when people start visioning about what could it mean for them and start putting plans in place, then actually psychologically that's taking them a journey of what can be possible. And then of course the big debate, I was fortunate enough to be in the spin room at that, along with one of course Miriam Brett, who's going to be joining us later today. And then Business for Scotland held a very successful conference that the First Minister spoke at, and actually, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, why did Alex Salmon leave his best lines for the Business for Scotland conference and not the great debate the night before?
Yeah, I mean, strategically, I am assured, because I asked about how did he think the debate went, and I have to say he was fairly upbeat. He said, very well. Which left me a bit of a...
He would, wouldn't he?
Well, of course he would, but that was in private. That wasn't in the conference. That was waiting to greet him as he was coming in. And as I said, right, tell me a bit more about that. So I suspect we may move on to the kind of main topic that's being talked about today in terms of currency. But he did cover that in the conference, and... notable
Very
as
good.
well was Philippa Whitford.
Oh, the NHS. We're talking about that later too.
Yes,
I should think.
yes. And then apart from today, last night I was in St Andrews doing a debate, 2 yeses, myself and Susan Stewart, and 2 no's, Ruth Mackay, who's actually a business lady here in Edinburgh, and Candy Manji, who's fairly well known. So that was a nice wee snapshot.
Indeed, and very busy week, and you've been busy this morning because you've been looking through the papers on our behalf.
Yes.
Choose some stories in which we can discuss.
I thought we would lead first of all. Actually, I'll just let everyone see this. We now have the news, of course, that Obama poised last night to order airstrikes against jihadists. And obviously, for those of us that have lived through the kind of developing themes in the Middle East, I wondered what your kind of take was in terms of should we be concerned about this? What does it mean for us in the light of our kind of discussions around independence?
Well, there's disturbing echoes of a number of international events here. Of course, as you rightly say, that story has kind of been overtaken by events because Obama has now said they will have airstrikes against IS, the Islamic State, who have been apparently ethnic cleansing the north of Iraq. And there's 100,000 refugees now making their way into the hills. So we have a potential humanitarian catastrophe here, which has a number of disturbing resonances. It's very like Kosovo, for example, in 1999. And I think that the Western response is going to be the same. I think they will have to endorse at least some limited military action here. I mean, IS are a pretty unpleasant lot. They're also they're opportunistic. There's only about 10,000 of them. This is not restarting the Iraq war. I think we should be clear about that. And it's mainly because they've got access to lots of military equipment from the defunct Iraqi army. That's what's given them this fighting power. And I think we saw what happened in Libya when genocide was forestalled by military intervention, by air power. I think they may have to do that again. Yeah,
my worry is in terms of even when Al-Qaeda says they're way out of line. That is a concern.
They're even more extreme than Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, I know, and I think we probably need to reflect on that as part of the debate.
But just more the on-running disaster of Iraq, really, for which we are largely responsible.
A slightly more kind of puff piece then. Of course, we've got our love letter to save the UK. What's your kind of take on that? Is that going to be the trick for the No campaign? Well, I mean, the worthies, I had a look through of, who's sort of signed it. Judi Dench, Alan Sugar, Mick Jagger, and so on, Ross Kemp. I mean, I know when I was in London recently doing a debate, the people that were at that debate were saying, is it that we haven't told you we love you enough? Which, for me, actually was quite interesting that, look, sorry, the debate's not about that, and really just absurdly fluffy.
They get it. So, I mean, they have such a tin ear, really. I mean,
that's
Dame Vera Lynn, Bruce Forsyth, are they going to persuade people in Scotland? Simon Cowell? I mean, I think the SNP are rubbing their hands with glee at this. The more things like this that come up, celebs calling in Scotland to stay within the Union, people who have no interest in Scotland other than that, I think it is totally counterproductive. Look, they may mean well, but I think they should just pipe down.
To what extent do you think it's potentially symptomatic of how immature the debate is in London? Because it's largely been ignored.
I think you're absolutely right. It's a very good point. I spent a lot of time in London, and it's astonishing how far behind the debate they actually are. They still think in terms of, this is Scots, who hate the English. It's Scots with blue paint. It's like football nationalism. And they think, well, we've got to show that we don't reciprocate in kind, that we actually like Scottish people and we don't want to have fights with them and stuff. And they don't get it. They don't realise it's not like that. It hasn't been like that for at least 30 years, if it ever was.
Absolutely.
Scottish people do not hate English people. That's not what independence is about.
Of course.
It's about politics, about democratic control.
Yes, absolutely. And then, of course, here we are again, a sense of Groundhog Day, if you like. Salmond refuses to back down in the Daily Telegraph. Here we are again, currency, Groundhog Day, right enough. Alex Salmond on the ropes. And so it goes on. 4 to 1 to stand.
Same headline day after day. I think I've seen that headline at least 4 times. Alex Salmond being beaten around. And well, I don't know. I mean, what can you say? There is a plan B. There's a plan C, a plan D, and they are. It is in the Fiscal Commission report, which, as I'm sure you know, was compiled by some very eminent economic authorities. I fear, as my colleagues in the press want to reduce this to a single issue campaign, which is about the pound and the consequences of the declaration of monetary exclusion, which George Osborne perpetrated on the 13th of February, so egregiously saying that Scots would be denied use of the pound, which everybody realises is complete nonsense. Now look, you are a businesswoman. You worked for RBS. You worked for 16 years even in Standard Life.
I did. So I did many happy days there.
You know a thing or two about pounds. What do you think about it?
Well, my firm view is it's a campaigning and strategic position that has been adopted by the No campaign. Potentially some significant risks to them as well. So you see, the sort of billboards, you cannot keep your pound, and of course that's completely absurd. Of course we can use the pound, anyone can use the pound. And the nub of it, of course, is under the framework of a currency union. And as Carney himself pointed out, I was fortunate enough to be at his lunch that...
Mark Carney, Governor of the Bank of
Yes,
England.
that's correct, yes. And there are pros and cons of that. But when you look at the... and the Scottish Government will quote this, the Fiscal Commission Working Group report, as you commented, Stieglitz, Merlis, who Carney most esteems, he said himself in that speech, they've looked at all the options and they've concluded all things on balance considered a currency union is the way to go. So the likes of Standard Life, I mean, I was in touch with some of the executives when the kind of stooshy blew up there, and you know, I'd like to just make clear, Standard Life did not say, oh, we're out of here.
Well, they certainly appeared to say that. They suggested they were making contingency plans to relocate because of uncertainty about the currency.
To relocate potentially some back office functions. Standard Life is very much a Scottish company. It's branded as a Scottish company. It's intellectual capital.
And you're still in touch with people in Standard Life?
Oh yes, frequently, yes. And obviously I won't tell you who for good reason, but they are quite clear. They're intellectual capitals in Edinburgh, they're fund managers, they're actuaries. These guys are paid a lot of money and for good reason. The idea of them shutting up shop is simply not conceivable, and those of us with longer memories remember similar kind of concerns with Scott Bell during devolution, so I remain unconvinced, actually.
Yeah, and RBS, I mean, you know, people say, we had the NISR today saying, oh, you know, RBS would have to relocate. RBS is already a City of London bank.
Yeah, I mean, largely. I think they estimate it's about 85 to 90% of its operations are in London. Yeah. You know, so the fact that it retains a brass plaque on Gogarburn isn't entirely meaningful.
Look, let them have RBS. Let them have the debt. I don't care.
Well, I mean, I think we can do a lot of money. I mean, we may discuss this more through the course
We may
of the
indeed, because now we're going to move on to some more true celebrities. We're going to get Alex Massie up now, who's a prolific blogger and tweeter, who's a reputation as one of the sharpest tools in the Unionist box. And we've also got Tommy Sheppard, who's the former Assistant General Secretary of the Labour Party, has been showcasing a galaxy of celebrities at the Stand Comedy Club, of which he's a proprietor, which has been running various venues at the Edinburgh Festival connected with the Assembly. In St Andrew's Square. Indeed, they're actually hosting a show which was inspired by David Craig, the playwright, called All Back to Bowie's, which takes as its premise David Bowie's remark that you know, he didn't want Scotland to leave. Please stay with us, I think is what he said, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah, not even in his own words, though, to get someone else to say that for him. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, who was it that said it? I can't remember.
I can't remember either. No.
Academic, because that was that. Now we are. Have we got Alex? Can we? Here he is. Yes, don't be shy. In you come. Yeah, come on, give him a round. Heavens above.
Hi there.
And Tommy Sheppard. Okay, Alex. Celebs for the union. What do you think?
Well, it's not the sort of thing that's going to decide the issue one way or the other, but it seems to me perfectly reasonable for people living out with Scotland to say that they actually value Great Britain and the United Kingdom as it currently exists, and they think that independence would be a retrograde step, not so much for Scotland, but for England, for the UK as a whole. Now, I don't think, as I say, that this is going to have a meaningful impact on the referendum, just as I don't think celebrities who come out and endorse a yes vote are going to have an impact. But I don't think there's. I think it's a perfectly legitimate thing for people in other parts of the UK to voice their preferences. I mean, after all, the result of this process has an impact on them. It just as much, or not just as much, but you know. The impact and the consequences aren't felt solely within Scotland, and so it is other people's business too, not as a secondary matter perhaps. But you know, I think sort of sneering at them and so on is somewhat unattractive. Just as sneering at actors and so on who come out in favour of yes is fairly unattractive. But there are a lot of serious people on that list as well. I mean, you know, not
put
idiots.
Somewhat longer words than it's stated in the actual letter, though. I mean, the sentiment is "don't leave us," when in reality, of course, we're not going anywhere.
No, well, hang on. Yeah, we would be, because we'd be establishing a separate state. That is, I believe, the whole point of independence. You know, there would no longer be.
You're perhaps, if you don't mind me saying, assuming something around the social unions. What's on the table, and I know the No campaign will make.
No, what's on the table is the end of the United Kingdom as we currently know it, and it is utterly absurd to pretend otherwise. You know, this notion that all the good things will remain and all the bad things will be jettisoned is infantile, frankly, as well as being deeply insulting, not just to people in Scotland, but to people elsewhere in the United Kingdom. Now, you know, pretending that everything would continue just as it was after independence. Well, if you believe that, then what's the point of independence?
I personally haven't been aware of anyone saying that that is the case. I suppose what I wanted to ask you about was my comment to Iain earlier. To what extent do you think that the simplicity of the letter itself is actually symptomatic of the current lack of understanding about all the visioning that's being done in Scotland around opportunities and looking forward, regardless, incidentally, the constitutional changes? Because the letter itself is you know, is quite a simple letter. It's not a philosophy, if you like.
Yeah, because it's a whole load of people saying, we know that we don't have a vote in this, all right? And we know that it would be silly to tell you or start lecturing you about what we think you should do. But, you know, just to let you know that we think the United Kingdom is something worth preserving. We think that Great Britain, as it's currently organised, actually is a successful country and that has a future. And we think it would be diminished, that we would be diminished by your absence. Now, that seems to me a perfectly polite and inoffensive way of going about things and so on. And it's certainly not trying to lecture Scots or talk down to Scots. You know, and the only way I think you can think that it is that sort of operation is if you're a sort of professional grievance seeker, which is admittedly of which admittedly we have no shortage in this country. You know, so you know, but it's not going to have a major impact on the referendum, on the result.
So a fluff piece. And Tommy, what's your take on it then?
I haven't read the letter, but from what I've heard, you know, I think it seems to be a bunch of people who are misinformed and misguided, and they're believing a lot of the misinformation that's put about what the Yes campaign represents. I mean, we're talking about a new way of governing Scotland and a new organisation of government in Scotland, and I would have thought a better position for people who maybe don't know that much about it, living in the leafy suburbs of London, might be to say that they would let the Scots make their own decision and respect whatever decision
they say that quite clearly. They say that quite clearly.
But
I mean, you know,
and I didn't interrupt you. You know, Alex going on about separation and used the word absence, that we were as if we were suddenly going to disappear. I mean, no one's going to dig a trench at Hadrian's Wall or build, you know, we're not going to float out into the North Sea. Britain will remain, Scotland will remain part of the British Isles, you know, so we're not going anywhere. And I think, I firmly believe that actually independence and the self-government which comes about as a result will lead to better governance of the UK. Because I think, as sure as night follows day, if we get self-government north of the border, then the great regions of England will start demanding more autonomy from what is effectively a city-state in London, which corrupts the whole of the government of the UK, in my view.
And obviously you've got a fascinating perspective, given your background in the Labour Party. From your perspective, how have you seen the debate develop, almost like from a British context, your previous colleagues, if you like, in the Labour Party, other people that you had close associations with? What's your kind of take on how it's developed?
I mean, I think many people in the Yes campaign have been on a journey, and many still are, to be honest. I mean, I wouldn't have taken this view even 5 years ago, but I've come to a realisation, I think, that, you know, given my lifestyle, I'm not sure how much longer I've got left, but I mean, let's say we've got two or three decades. For 40 years I've campaigned for social democratic reform in this country and been frustrated by it, and I'm now firmly of the belief that to achieve the type of social change I'd like to see, there's a much better prospect for that if we do it in a small Northern European country of 5.5 million people with a highly literate workforce and a highly developed social and physical infrastructure and an abundance of natural resources. I think we can actually be a beacon in Europe and the world to show things how society can be organised better.
Ed Miliband, today in Scotland, you're not going to have the pound. Pound is my property. You're not going to get a sniff of it after independence. How do you think that goes down with ordinary Labour voters?
Well, I think I don't know. I mean, it's part of the fear project. I mean, you know, it's part of trying to scare people, saying, "Oh, everything's uncertain." I mean, of course, the future's uncertain. That's why it's the future, you know. But I don't know how well it goes down actually, because I think people do think it's bluff at the end of the day. I mean, the pound is one of many things which would have to be negotiated if there was a yes vote, you know. And if they're going to say you can't have the assets, and I think we say, well, we're not having the liabilities neither. You know, I mean, like the London Underground was built out of the UK Exchequer's funds, for example. So technically we're entitled to 22 tube stations in the London Underground network.
Yeah.
No one's going to suggest we get them, but I'm just saying that there's, you know, there's a balance sheet has to be set with assets and liabilities.
Alex, do you seriously think that after independence they would build a financial Hadrian's Wall to stop Scotland using the pound?
There are two different things and so on, and the Yes campaign, and you're doing the same, Iain, so it conflates them. Of course, Scotland could use the pound as a process of sterlingisation, but sterlingisation is very different from a formal currency union. Now, it may be that a Westminster government, of whether it's led by a Conservative Prime Minister or a Labour Prime Minister, would agree to a formal currency union, but there is no way that Alex Salmond can guarantee that. Sterlingisation, hang on a second, sterlingisation is an extremely different thing. You know, saying that the pound in your pocket won't change, well, sure, but it will.
But it has been the No campaign that consistently say, if you want to keep the pound, but in actual fact, as we know, and would you agree with that, there's nothing to stop Scotland or indeed any other country using the pound.
Yeah, and we could use the yen. We could use the yen as well, or the US
dollar. So
this
opening statement, that's what I'm trying to establish. The opening statement is incorrect. Correct. It's about currency union.
The only way you can guarantee that is with a no vote. Actually, that is true.
Stop us using the pound. That's what I'm trying to get across. There's nothing to stop.
You're trying to get across something as controversial as saying Tuesday follows Monday, and expect me to be impressed by that. I'm not going to be impressed by that because it's a statement of the obvious, but sterlingisation is different from a currency union.
Correct.
What's the problem though? Norway has its own currency. Denmark has its own currency. Switzerland has its own currency. What's the problem?
I mean, if I were running the Yes campaign, I think I would have gone for Scotland establishing a currency of its own, as most other countries did. Now, the reason, of course, they didn't do that is based on politics, not economics and so on, because they felt that the business community in particular would be horrified by the idea of switching to a separate currency, of the risks and entailed in that, and transaction costs for cross-border trade and so on.
To what extent do you think it's a political decision?
Well, of course it's political. Of course it's political. The SNP have had 3 different favoured currencies for Scotland in 20 years. Each time it's been a question of political assessment.
Yeah, exactly. Sure. I mean, it's not unusual for political parties to change.
But I mean, surely the downside risk must be with our UK after independence, because if Scotland is, excluded from a currency union, which after all, even Mark Carney said was...
Oh, it can be made to work, yes.
Even Mark Carney said there was an optimal currency. If Scotland is excluded from that, the risk is surely with the rest of the UK. Because Scotland would not be then responsible for its share of the per capita share of the UK national debt. Well, how are the markets going to react to that?
Badly, I would suggest.
That's already priced in because the UK government
has accepted 100%.
Has accepted that. So the markets won't have any reaction to it whatsoever. Now, and sure, it would save Scotland and independent Scotland some money.
I don't think you can necessarily say that. What about the balance of payments? Is that not a worry for you?
By definition, the impact of 90% of the UK can manage to cope with the loss of 10% of it rather more easily than a lot of people in Scotland.
What about the suggestion from some economists that there could be a run on the pound?
An additional £5 billion a year of debt interest payments for the rump UK is something they would rather not have, but in the context of an annual budget of more than £600 billion a year, it is something that can be managed. It's not going to cause the sky to fall.
No, if the UK lost a third of its land mass, its nuclear weapons,
but there are all sorts of
lost
why the UK
90% of its oil revenue.
Why the UK government wants the UK to remain. But in the end, if Scotland can survive as an independent country, the rest of the United Kingdom can probably survive without Scotland.
I think.
Sorry, good fighting stuff there. This is slightly awkward to do both at the same time. But anyway, I just wanted to bring Tommy in here again, just about Ed Miliband. I mean, there's a problem surely for Labour, looking forward. That it has a lot of people in its ranks who are clearly antagonised by this kind of diktat, if you like, from the outside. I mean, apart from anything else, we have Ed Balls leaping up to endorse George Osborne about denying Scotland use of the currency. I mean, do you think that really goes down well?
No, I don't. I mean, I think people realise. I mean, it's almost hard to believe that we're at 45% in the polls when you consider that every national newspaper bar one, pretty much the entire British state, and all the main political parties in the UK are against and campaigning for a no vote. I mean, in that context, it's staggering that the support for yes is as big as it is, and what that must mean is that a lot of people don't trust these arguments that are being put forward. A lot of people are not using conventional means of media to get their information, and that there is a big grassroots debate going on and people are thinking about things. And that's why I believe that we're going to win this, because I don't think people will. Of course people will be scared, of course people will be uncertain, but at the end of the day, they'll weigh things up and they say, is it a risk worth taking? And I think they will say, yes it is, because we're not okay at the moment. You know what I mean? To say that you have a Scottish Parliament which is increasingly under financial pressure and gets its resources attacked by Westminster on the one hand, and you have a Tory government in Westminster, describe that as the best of both worlds is beyond me, frankly. That's the worst of both worlds as far as I can see. So if we actually had control of our own resources, I think we could do a lot better. And I mean, as well as being an old lefty, I'm an accidental businessman now as well. I mean, so I run businesses both sides of the border. We have our biggest club is actually in Newcastle. And I think that keeping a common currency, certainly in the foreseeable future, is the sensible thing to do, because the economies north and south of the border pretty much converge. Some way down the line, taking action, social and economic policies in Scotland might change. Scotland might be a more prosperous country. It might want to then not be tied to the pound sterling because it will be holding our economy back. But that's a decision for the future. For the short term, it seems to me the sensible thing to do. And I don't quite understand why, on the one hand, people who are against this proposition say, vote no, you mustn't have any independence at all. But if you have it, we're going to make sure that you're as isolated as possible.
But that's where the politics comes in, isn't it? I mean, it's politicians that are saying that rather than the economists, because obviously there's some very serious economists who, and who are well rated. None least of all, obviously, Carney was. I mean, his speech that I was fortunate enough to be at, was very well versed and balanced, and it was interesting watching the kind of Twitter feeds as he made the comment. Well, of course, it can be a currency union. Actually, it is indeed an optimal currency area. The tweets were going for the yes. However, on balance, both sides need to realise that they're giving up a level of sovereignty. His comment about so actually his speech was very balanced.
Since really said this morning, they actually take that on the chin. They do accept they would be ceding sovereignty.
There's nothing wrong with sharing sovereignty. The point is who.
Well, we all do that now, don't we?
In order to then decide to give some of that away. I mean, possibly only North Korea, not even then, is the only truly independent country. I mean, everybody else is living in an interdependent world. And we want self-government in Scotland to be able to play a much better part in that interdependence.
But it's interesting, though, that independence means that the parameters within which an independent Scotland's budget would be set in London, not in Edinburgh. I mean, that's an interesting definition of independence. And you might go further and say that if the UK is such an attractive current economic unit that it forms an ideal mechanism for a currency union, monetary union, then, gosh, it might even be a sufficiently attractive unit to form a political union too.
Well, France and Germany are independent countries, but they're
increasingly less so.
Well,
but hop across the Irish Sea and so on, and you see there, the Irish budget is seen in Berlin before it's seen in Dublin now.
Well, they still, I know, but they don't regard themselves. They still regard themselves as independent countries.
But you read editorials from the Irish Times in recent years bemoaning the loss of sovereignty to Berlin. And German bureaucrats sitting in the Irish finance ministry. Now, you might say that's an extreme example, but that's where
so would you have preferred to have seen the Scottish Government adopt or advocate, in effect, a kind of North Korea model? I mean, surely...
I'm not really in favour of the North Korea model when it comes to anything.
The point I'm trying to make is, to what extent is what they have set out a reaction. We're all probably of a similar age, a reaction to how we've seen kind of both macroeconomics and globalisation kind of emerge. To what extent is what they've set out actually a reaction to that? Things are different now, say, to when it was first mooted.
It's a reaction
when we were younger.
how can we maximise our chances of winning a yes vote? How can we cause as few difficulties as possible? How can we reassure as many people as possible? How can we, ensure that you won't have to change your money when you cross the Tweed? That's what it's about.
So
it's not about economics. And I don't think they ever thought that Osborne and Balls would call their bluff on that. Logically, a separate Scottish currency and so on, just to say when Estonia became independent, they set up their own currency, would have made sense from all sorts of philosophical point of view. And I think in terms of self-worth as well, actually. But politically, that would have been a difficult sell. So that's why they went with the currency union. But there are problems with that. And just as there are problems with sterlingisation.
Okay. Final word, Tommy.
So you don't accept that a bunch of reasonably skilled and intelligent people sat down and looked at these options and decided that one of these might be best, then you think it's just purely a...
Well, I know that sterlingisation is the one that Mr. Salmon's own much ballyhooed fiscal commission rejects as the worst of all possible outcomes. But that at the moment is the plan B with which he thinks is quite attractive.
Well, I'm not aware of that. But anyway, very interesting. Time to move on now. I think we have a further two guests. So I'd like to say thank you very much, Tommy, for coming in. Thank you very much, Alec, for joining us. And yes, now moving on, we have a further guest now, Neil Asherson, who I'm sure will be known to many of you, both as a writer and journalist. But most interestingly for me, he's covered all three referendums, so he's got a fantastic perspective in this sort of history and development of what we're touching on today. Most recently, he's been travelling on the bus party all around Scotland, so I think we'll get a lot of useful insight from him and how we're all thinking and feeling about this big debate. British elections, he says, must no longer trample the will of the Scottish people. Neil Asherson. Is he coming in?
I think we have a slight hiatus, as we like to describe it in show business, while Neil Asherson's getting mic'd up. What about, tell us who else is coming on?
Well, Miriam Brett, who I met for the first time in the spin room at the debate on Tuesday night, part of Yestival and National Collective. And it's generally conceded that National Collective has been one of the kind of game changers, I think, around the referendum, and their recent Yestival had a significant impact.
What's she got to say?
Well, I note here that she's particularly interested in misogyny in politics, which is something that I mentioned, the way we are kind of talked at. Obviously, I may well be doing the same thing. But shall we move on and take Miriam just now? Then that might be.
Yeah. Well, who's next? Who's up?
I think
Neil. Come
right.
on, Neil.
Okay. Good. Neil's coming in.
Yeah, here he is. Great stuff.
Hi, Neil. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Some technical problems there. This is a live show.
Yeah.
This is takeover television. What do you think of it so far?
Don't say that.
I've seen of it, I'm amazed. This is the most grown-up issue I've heard. Fed up with rubbish discussions which go off into political niceties. And this was really what the Germans call sachlich, with facts, with passion, and just very intelligent. Really got through, in 10 minutes we got through more than most of this debate has got through 2 years. That's wonderful. I'm really impressed.
Well, as Michelle's saying there, you've been through all three of these camps. I remember avidly reading your accounts of the 1979 referendum campaign, which I was fascinated by at the time. Though I had a very different political perspective in those days, I have to say. Looking at this campaign, how different is it from the previous two?
Oh, it's extremely different. I mean, the first two campaigns were remarkable in the sense, well, they were all really asking the question of, can we, are we not too stupid, too poor, etc., etc. They were asking these questions. They were also bringing up a series of deep objections, like, we'll all be governed by Glasgow Councillors, we don't want that, or it was just a talking shop. And indeed, there was also a block of people who were going to vote no in both of those, because they felt that the Assembly/Parliament wouldn't be strong enough to be any good, you see. So they actually vote no, vote for something better.
Even Lord Hume said that. Even Lord Hume famously said
Well,
that.
we
himself.
know where that ended up, yes.
But the differences are very big. I mean, the real difference is, of course, questions people are putting to themselves and the assumption they start from are different. And
Give me an example. You know, what's the sort of, how do the questions people are asking themselves just now differ to what they were? Is it around the philosophical element? Is it around the economy? Is it about maturity, self-confidence?
it's about, you see, people are saying that what they're not saying, the question they're not asking themselves is, are we too small, weak, poor, stupid, etc. They're saying, yes, we can, but do we want to?
Yeah.
And that's a new question. And I hadn't really, in the previous two referenda, heard anything like that. And so you get this extraordinary mass of people. Again, this is quite new to me. I haven't seen large masses of Scottish people saying, I am preparing to change my mind. You know, a huge statement. And adding, and it hurts. You know, it's painful. I'm looking at my old assumptions, probably inherited assumptions. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what to do about them now. I think I may, I don't see how I could vote no. You know, and you get this. This is new to me, and it's extremely moving. I mean, the sort of heroes of, I was on this bus party journey. We went across Scotland a few weeks ago, and again you got this, the sort of heroes of the people. These people who say, I'm not sure, but I think, you know, I'm really having to examine what I have always
People
thought.
say it's seen the revival of the public meeting, the revival of the town hall meeting, the revival of grassroots politics. Do you think that's justified?
I think it's, well, to some extent it is. Some people have found that. We didn't always get very big audiences, as a matter of fact. They were good, but sometimes they were quite small. I mean, I think there is a revival, but that's a slightly different topic. It's been going on for many years.
I think there is much more political engagement and interest in this than I think in either of the two previous referendums, even 1997, where people were pretty clear they wanted to establish a Scottish Parliament, but there was a great deal of a sense that it was still the property of the establishment, the established political parties, and people were kind of being drawn along in it. This time, I think people really are considering it for themselves and realizing that this is a very serious decision that's being taken. They've got to think about it.
Yeah, I mean, somebody said to me, I can't remember, Lochgelly or something like that, and she said, I hope that whatever way we vote, we could carry on with our uncertainties and discussing them into a new Scotland, you know.
That's
But,
a lovely
which
way of
I
putting
like
it.
that very
Yeah,
much. And of course you also, another thing I remember somebody saying, and these are sort of statements rather than questions, of course, saying, I want to live in a Scotland where nobody feels they have to say I'm a proud Scot.
But,
and, you know,
we
get
usually
all
with
that.
a but at the end.
But the, you know, the big thing was asking what sort of Scotland you want. You see, I'm very interested in Poland, and always have been.
Yeah, you've got your badge. It's
I've got my badge with
Scotland.
Polish
We're
Scottish
great. We're very into
badge.
Poland in this programme, as you probably know.
Yes, I know. I noticed that.
And Blair Jenkins,
Well, the
the
thing
leader
is, when the
that-
Poles lost their independence, when they were trying to get it back, you know, 123 years of darkness and misery for them, and they said to each other, they didn't say, you know, do we want independence or not? They said, Poland, yes, but what sort of Poland? That's their question. The slogan was a question. And so I thought that's just what we need.
You've got a very broad experience of independence movements throughout Eastern Europe,
Well, yes.
right through the collapse.
Well, not
of
only, I mean, Africa as well.
Africa as well, indeed. But isn't it strange that this independence debate seems to be obsessed with the single issue of the currency? Can you think of any independence movement in the past which has found that is the key issue?
No, I can't.
I can't think of
I mean, well, there have been some independence struggles and campaigns which have been obsessed with questions of frontiers, to the extent that some people said, you know, if independence means we have to give up this territory or that territory, then I'm against it, you know, that kind of thing. But no, not on this technical thing of the currency, which, as a matter of fact, is a sort of rubbish discourse
It is.
anyway.
Yes.
So why do you think it's dominating the campaign?
Because of an intense respectability, you know, it's kind of built into modern Scottish politics, in which people don't want to show bleeding hearts and say, you know, I love my country, I want it to be free, and go sort of brave heart about this thing. And so when people say, well, let's not get too emotional about this, let's talk about the real things which matter, the economy, you know, and that sort of thing. So people with some relief go to that, although possibly in their hearts they don't really believe that's what matters most. And the question is,
Yeah, it is interesting.
Yeah, because I mean, you know, the conspiracy theory, of course, is that this is just all got up by the London press, by the London media. They're obsessed with this single issue, and that's why they're trying to reduce the campaign to that. But you actually believe this kind of chimes in a certain sense with Scotland's own attitudes.
yes, I think there, you know, there is unfortunately a Scottish willingness to retreat from dangerous emotional areas into, you know, a sort of dry battle over this question of the currency, which, as a matter of fact, is, you know, as I say, it's baseless. It's just not a real.
And to what extent do you concur then with the potential of the view that after this, regardless of outcome, we will have just moved a little chink along to being more comfortable with talking about these feelings? Do you think that will happen? Okay, I don't think we're going to be like overnight suddenly all extroverted about these feelings, but just moving the slider along, if you like.
I think it certainly will move a slide along. I mean, okay, let's just fantasize for a moment. It's September let's say the 20th, or maybe it's the first Saturday night after the 18th, and there's been a huge yes vote. Just imagine this. Now, are there going to be 100,000 people in Princes Street drinking and crying and embracing each other? Well,
this isn't Catalonia. This isn't Barcelona. We don't have million-person marches here. We just don't go in for that kind of emotionalism.
a lot of people will feel like doing that. Will they actually
Will
do
they
it?
actually? It's
But
not.
nonetheless,
Scots
there
don't
will
do
be
that.
some release of emotion if this happens. And
It'll be a very Scottish motion. Look, final question. This is your third. It's 1-1 so far. How do you think this one's going to go? This referendum, yes or no?
well, I'd put it, being evasive, like a bit like both participants in the great debate. You know, I'd answer a different question. I think I would put it like this: Yes has overwhelmingly won the campaign. It may very probably lose the vote.
Right. An each-way decision. Fine.
Right.
I think
Okay.
we're about out of time. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you, Neil.
Thank you.
Speak to you
Delighted.
Okay,
Thanks a
and
lot.
so
Actually, hang on though, because I think you say you're staying to the with us to the end. Is that right?
that's right. Yes. So moving on, then we do indeed now have Miriam Brett, a young lady who I understand is extremely talented. Speaking to a mutual friend last night, fourth-year international politics student at Stirling University as well. So Miriam, if you'd like to join us. Hi. Hi there. So, spin room.
Yes.
How was it for you?
It was a good
Did you
experience.
spin?
No, I did no spinning, no.
What was your take on the debate then?
I mean, I thought the debate was very interesting. I know a lot of people on the yes sides kind of had this presumption that Alec would just slaughter him and that would be over. And I think what he did was much more tactful than that. I mean, if you look at the nature of that debate, I don't really feel, personally, I don't really feel the type of debate, the structure of debate, the format of the debate can ever be truly informative, because it's about personality politics, you know, and it's a very aggressive style of debate that they use you versus you and just go for it. You know, it's almost like a boxing ring. And of course, the people that we need to persuade just now are by and large women in this debate, because they are still overwhelmingly.
Is that right? Sarah Sheridan yesterday was rather dismissing that theory, but you think it is a...
I think it's still, I mean, I think if you look at the tactics of the No campaign, and particularly their focus on fear, if you look at who's been sort of affected most by these cutbacks, if you look at who's more economically unstable at the moment, it is by and large women. And so this sort of notion of things might actually get worse will prey on them. That's my own take on it.
But why do you think they're resistant to the idea of voting yes, because obviously, you know, there's been a lot of big offers to the women's vote, childcare, free childcare, for example, in the white paper.
Yeah, which would completely transform our economy. It would completely transform women's place in our society as well. So these are things that should be appealing, but I think there is sort of that overriding notion of change as a potential like trigger of instability and trigger of...
And is that your perception, or is that based on anecdotal evidence in terms of, like, you know, your community, your age group that you're engaging with?
Not so much my age group. I think the sentiment's been quite different there, especially in... I've done a lot of school debates and the likes of recently, and that, but it's separate issues. It's a separate, completely separate demographic. So younger women are not thinking about their family as a whole as well, which is another reason I think that women perhaps take longer to sort of analyse and weigh up both sides of the debate, so wouldn't necessarily originally come out for yes.
Yeah. Do you think there's an irony in terms of the debate being conducted in a fairly masculine style in terms of this talking at rather than engaging with it, that ironically is perhaps taking women away rather than bringing them to the table, even to the debate, never mind to make up their minds? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, this notion that, you know, the notion that this gives off, and also you have to look at who the media focus on as well, which is very much Salmond at the head of this. And again, it's a very masculine persona. It's a very aggressive style of running a campaign in terms of how it's been framed in the media. But if you look at the work of grassroots organisations and what they've been doing at a ground level and how they've reached out to women, I mean, the Women for Independence is the obvious given, and you know, the likes of the meetings and the events that they've actually been organising, you know, it's very relaxed environments. It's sitting down at tables and chatting with people and actually getting your questions out there and speaking about it in groups and having coffee mornings, and there'll be creches available. You know, these are actually sort of bringing the debate A, to communities, but B, to women in those communities specifically.
And do you think that we can really affect a change in psyche, if you like, of how we do our politics with independence? Was that something you'd like to see happen?
I think it's been changed already, actually. I think not. I mean, there's more to be done, but certainly in terms of, I noticed earlier you were speaking about bringing sort of the public meetings back again. You know, some of the ones that we've been talking at have had, you know, 100, 200 people in them. That's unheard of. I can't think of anywhere else in the world. Just
certainly not my experience.
Democracy is as alive as it is to fill public halls throughout the country.
Well, Neil's been saying though that, you know, Scots, you know, tend not to go in for these sort of large emotional demonstrations, as for example in Barcelona, where they've had million-person marches. They've had, you know, people linking arms the length of the Pyrenees. I mean, it's like you just don't get that in Scotland, do you? I mean, even the Estival's not been getting that kind of response.
No, I don't think it wanted to get that kind of response, though, because that's that would have to be about people who are already voting yes, going out and showing their vote for yes. I mean, the likes of Estival, I was up with them in Shetland, where I'm from.
Your home territory,
and they got nearly 200 people in a hall, and that's a no-voting community. That's and it's also remarkable. A community that, but the beauty of the likes of Estival and the work of you know, the likes of National Collective is that it reaches out to an audience who aren't affiliated to political parties and who don't necessarily know anything or want to know anything about the ins and outs of political parties and the workings of them, or people who are disengaged and apathetic, to say actually politics can be really beautiful. Actually, you know, this can be about, you know, a celebration of a really diverse culture. It can be about cultural activism. So for a community like Shetland, actually, who are you know, so remote that political parties almost don't seem actually that relevant, the likes of National Collective actually going there and say and hosting a music event or a poetry event will bring more people than... You know.
So I suppose it is this idea, using this framework, which most interested me, to explore, of which almost the decision, we know there's a decision, and that's a kind of hard-edged thing, but exploring who we are and who we want to be, because that can only, I think, move us more toward yes, but also actually develop us. Was that the intention? To kind of develop our culture, to enable people to explore the kind of philosophical, the you know, to just engage with themselves almost as Scots.
Yeah, there's certainly an element of self-reflection there, but I think it is just showing people that actually politics is about much more than A, B and C. It's huge.
That's it.
And I mean, National Collective is always about imagining what we can be.
Yeah.
So I think the main debate tends to focus on the who are we, how do you define yourself, how do you, whereas people involved in Yes movement, I've certainly experienced, are thinking about, let's not get bogged down on who we are and what we identify with, and you know, in the media like to, even good articles I've noticed actually tend.
She doesn't mean you.
Tend to put pictures of the saltire and the Union Jack at the head as though this is our choice.
Yeah.
You know, when actual fact we should be thinking about, well, let's not think about, what it means to be me and what I identify with and who I am and where I come from, but where we're going.
So interesting about the way in which all these moving campaigns take music and song with them, and the way in which it's used, because what happens is, it's not that have a bit of music and a bit of a song make people feel easy or something like that, or good-natured. It happens, it makes people feel who they are in this particular, maybe Scottish context, and it gives people a certain confidence from which they can then proceed into listening to what speakers have to say and saying what they want to say. And that is a sort of enabling thing of identity, and it's really important. I've been so impressed with this, and I wonder how it works. Another thing I just wanted to say, which we talked about women, although, there's clear evidence that women are reluctant about yes, more so than men. Nevertheless, my experience so far has been that informal yes meetings and groupings are almost always organised by women. They do it.
Really?
Yes. Men occasionally do, but 90% of the groupings and sort of community gatherings that I've seen, whether they're just a one-off meeting or whether it's actually forming small groups which are supposed to have some life, women do this. And men don't. Women do it.
Just going back to what you said there, so I thought it was really interesting just thinking about how we can sort of self-reflect on our identity. Actually, I was at the National Collective Presents last night as part of their Fringe Festival, which you should all see if you haven't seen it already. And there was a Swedish-Norwegian group there playing folk music. And so I think it can actually, when they spoke and said like, well, why wouldn't you want this? You want what, and speaking about sort of in terms of political culture as well, a lot of that resonates with the Nordic Nordic models. And so actually that was really good in sort of reflecting about our place in the world and where do we want to align ourselves in sort of the wider context of it.
How do you think it's going? Yes or no?
I'm going to say yes. Of course I'm going to say yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you think, it's become a bit of a cliche, Neil, but people are all saying, well, Scotland's changed, doesn't matter what happens in the referendum, this is a different country now. Do you think there's any truth in that?
Scotland has changed.
Yeah.
No, very much. That's extremely important. And also it's a huge problem, opportunity, challenge, whatever you like to call it. Because if there's a no, it's a real torrent of change thinking and hope. People are very brave, to give themselves emotionally to the extent that they've given to this campaign. And you've got this huge mass of hope and expression. We on this bus tour, we bought an enormous great roll of backing paper, home base in Wick, and it's about 250 yards long. And wherever we went, we got people to say what sort of Scotland you want, and then write it down. We've got this huge thing. And all these hopes, what's going to happen to all this mobilization if there's a no? Who's going to try and say, yes, but this will, because of course something has been created which can't be uncreated. Scotland's a different country.
An energy.
Indeed.
An energy.
About that.
And we are
unfortunately done with it.
Indeed, and we'll just have to leave that hanging in the air, as we say in broadcasting, because that's pretty much us come to the end of the programme. Perhaps you can point us in the direction of that roll. We'd love to bring it in here. That long piece of paper. Scotland's other piece of paper.
It's around.
Okay, well, Neil Acheson, Miriam, Brett, thank you very much for that. Thank you indeed to all our guests today.
Thank you.
All our guests.
Thanks, everybody.
Massie, Tommy, Sheppard. And that just about brings us to the end of today's Referendum TV. This is, of course, takeover television. This has been created entirely by the people in this room. This is not a BBC broadcast. This is not STV. This has been Takeover Television with Referendum.net. And if you want to come in here and be part of the audience, you can get in touch with us through the website, referendumtv.net, or you can get in touch through the Edinburgh Fringe programme, perhaps, or its website, with Hill Street venue 41. And you can get tickets for our show. Now, we'll be back on Sunday. We'll have, amongst other people, Adam Robertson, this celebrated Scottish novelist who's been writing a poem for each. It's a short story, I think, called 365. Where there's a short story every day for 365 days throughout the year. You're going to be bringing a few of them in with him. And we'll also have a number of guests from the celebrated play 3,000 Trees, about the mysterious death of the SNP lawyer Willie McRae some time back. So, hope you'll tune in. Until then, from Michelle and from me, it's a very good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.